Hello everyone. I'm thinking of going to 2D Zelda because that's like 80% of the series, and there's so much untapped potential for fun. The issue is, most of them are stupid difficult, or just age poorly because NES and SNES. Yes! Yes! Minish Cap was developed by both Capcom and Nintendo, which is odd to think about because they're known for fighting games and 2D platformers. But it's not the first Zelda game. They made Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages in 2001, and then the port of Link to the Past with a bonus game of Four Swords in 2002. So Capcom was very familiar with the Zelda series at this point, making most of the handheld entries, and being familiar with the Game Boy Advance due to the amount of 2D Mega Man games that they released at the time, on the thing having a whole spin-off series basically exclusive to the Game Boy Advance. Of course, Minish Cap didn't do very well, which part of it is probably the box art. The box art shows the Wind Waker art style, which was very unpopular at the time because people wanted the dark and gritty Zelda game. They also have a box art that tells you nothing about what the game is about. Its background is just a kinstone piece. They have the Legend of Zelda logo and a picture of Link in a fighting pose. This tells you nothing. This could be any Zelda game in this art style. Granted, Zelda games are not always good with telling what the game is about. You look at Link Between Worlds box art, it still isn't great, but at least it gives you an idea of what the main gimmick of the game is, the wall merging mechanic. It's used all the time. Minish Cap just doesn't do that. The person that's at Target looking to buy this has no idea how the game plays. Another part of why Minish Cap probably did as poorly as it did was the time it released. It released right around the same time as the DS launch, so most people wanted a 3D Zelda game that was portable, or at least a 2D portable Zelda game that you can play with that had 3D models and sometimes at a 3D perspective. When it comes to the Minish Cap, it's full of items like all the Zelda games. It has mainstays like the boomerang and Pegasus boots. You have the bottles. You have sword and shield, bow and bombs. Oddly enough, the claw shot is not present in this game, which is a staple to the Zelda series. Minish Cap starts off with a nice mosaic and some basic text like you get in Wind Waker, but this one doesn't look abysmal. After that, it ends up with Zelda walking towards your house to drag you out of your bed to go to a festival, which is the festival. Zelda wins a shield and gives it to you, the player, or Link. You go fight a business scrub, and then you go to after this, you go to see a ceremony where the winner of a tournament, Vadi, gets to see the Picori sword. Instead of just looking at it and admiring its glory, he decides to destroy it and unleashes all the monsters that the sword had sealed. The monsters go attack everyone at the ceremony, but Zelda manages to defend herself with some weird magic. Vadi sees this and decides to turn her to stone. Link tries to protect her, and Link fails miserably because it's Link, and it's the beginning of a Zelda game. Link is weak. After you wake up, the king tells Link to go to the Minish Forest and find the Picori to reforge the Picori sword into a new sacred sword. But after that, you go to the forest and meet a little talking hat called Eslo, who tells you he knows where the Minish are. Minish and the Picori are the same thing, and will guide you there. He goes on your head like any parasite would and starts bossing you around, saying he can help you. This is where you're introduced to the main gimmick of the game, changing your size. You can go from normal size to tiny and back. This is useful because it lets you access new areas that you couldn't access before, some of which are vital to progressing in the game. Just try to imagine me as a smaller person. That's right, you can't. After talking with the Minish for a while, you go to Deep Witch Shrine, which is the first dungeon of the game, and your entire time you're Tiny Link. This teaches a lot of the basic mechanics of the game, such as pushing objects and stepping on buttons. It also has the Gust Jar, which is a nice fun item. It's basically a leaf blower mixed with a vacuum, which allows for a lot of fun uses of this item. It's similar to the Gust Bellows from Skyward Sword, but the Skyward Sword's item just removes the vacuum function. It also is used to propel you on lily pads while you're in the water, which is nice because it gives it more uses. It allows it to be much more versatile in puzzles. Overall, this dungeon is a fun little experience. Not the best Zelda dungeon, but not the worst by far. After you do Deep Witch Shrine, you're introduced to a mechanic known as Kinstone Fusion, What this does is it allows you to access more things within the world, creating new paths, just straight up creating chests, and this allows you to access most of the optional heart pieces and a lot of the optional rupee chests in the world. So it's a good idea to farm kinstones and fuse them with all these people. You're told where it is, and it's nowhere near where you fused them most of the time. You can find kinstones by basically cutting grass. You can also find mysterious shells, which you're not introduced to what they do for the first half of the game until much later. You can also fuse kinstones with some NPCs more than once, but you have to reload the area to fuse the kinstone with a single NPC again. You also unlock hidden skills in the game, which make combat much more enjoyable and actually much easier. The first one you get is the spin attack. Yeah, that's right. You have to unlock the spin attack. The other hidden skills are useful because they just improve combat more than what most of these auto games allow, making it a much more enjoyable experience. You go up Mount Krenel after you get the spin attack, and you unlock this new ability with Ezlo, where you can use him to go up these wind gusts. After that, you get the grip ring, and voila, you're climbing a freaking mountain and you got a ring to do it. When you're in the dungeon, you get the Staff of Pocky, which lets you flip things, which seems really stupid. And at this point, you also don't have the Picori sword because you give it away to people that originally forged it so they can make a new sword out of it. You're getting the elements in each of the dungeons to infuse with the new blade. After you beat the second dungeon, you're given the white sword, and you use it with the two elements you have, earth and fire. This allows you to make duplicates yourself on these colored panels, which allows you to do things like push bigger blocks and press multiple buttons at once, which is a main gimmick for the remainder of the game. After this, you go on a quest to get the Pegasus boots, a really short one, and you go to Castor Isles, which is a swamp, and you get the bow, which is a staple in all Zelda games, as you know. To do this, you go around and to find 3 unique kinstones to fuse with these guys, which then give you access to the dungeon by the way of destroying the rock that blocks the path to the dungeon. The dungeon itself is designed really uniquely. It's designed like a labyrinth that you get to dig through with the item of the dungeon, the Molmits, which in later games are introduced as the Magma Mitts and Digging Mitts. The Molmits kind of like the shovel from the previous 2D Zelda games. You get the Ocarina from this dungeon as instead of an element to throw you off because the element was moved elsewhere. The Ocarina is the warp item of the game, and lets you warp to all the wind crests you've unlocked, which you just interact with the wind crest and you get to warp there. Really unique. This is where you learn about what the shells do, and they let you get figurines by trading them in. The more shells you give away, the higher chance you have of getting a figurine. The only purpose of the figurines is once you have all 130 of them, you can unlock one final heart piece. Yes, you need to collect 130 figurines to get a heart piece, and you often have to spend hundreds of rupees to get the shells to do this. Now you go and gain the flippers from the Minish after doing a long quest with Vooks, because the Minish is in a library. So, because the next dungeon is in water, and you need to be able to swim in water instead of just drowning. Speaking of the next dungeon, it sucks. It has the ice physics. The whole dungeon is ice, or at least half of it. You slide so much in this, and the platforms are really tiny. All you do is slide. It sucks. Once you beat the ice dungeon, Temple of Droplets, you infuse your sword again, and you go to this graveyard section to talk to an old king of Hyrule. This graveyard section takes advantage of the lantern, the dungeon's item, and after that you get to go to the Palace of Winds, which is very difficult, and so difficult that you're given a bunch of fairies at the entrance, and you can keep on farming these. That's how much danger is in this dungeon. This dungeon just never ends. You do get a nice item, the Rock Cape, which is an evolution of the Rock Feather from previous Zelda games. But this dungeon just doesn't end. It feels like 2 mini dungeons were slapped together to make a very long dungeon. The 2 dungeons don't even have the same theme. They feel completely different dungeons entirely. They feel like they could have been separate and then merged together. After all this, you get to go to Dark Hyrule Castle, which is a very difficult dungeon compared to those. You have to fight a bunch of Dark Nuts, and then you get to fight Vaati. Vaati is BS. He has several stages, and you have to use all the mechanics you've learned throughout the game to fight Vaati, especially the duplicating yourself to multiple forms. Once you beat Vaati, peace is restored to Hyrule, yada yada yada. It's typical Zelda ending. Overall, Minish Cap is a decent 2D Zelda experience, but is not a good or bad one.